skip this agenda slide and just go quickly kind of to roll call just to make sure, as always, that you can hear me and I can hear you. So Ari, are you there?
Hey, I'm here and loud and clear.
Okay, Atashna, I think we can hear each other, but just confirming.
Yes.
Perfect. Dawn?
I am here.
Awesome. Karen Blakemore?
Here.
Perfect. Kayla?
Yep.
Chris?
Hello, hello.
Hello. Lee?
Here.
May? I think we can hear each other, but confirming.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Scott?
I'm here.
Perfect. And then I don't think I see Tom, Susan, Ron, or Jill yet. Is that correct? Okay. And Billy can't join us, so he will not be here. So I'd like to, hopefully they'll trickle in and I'll keep my eye out. But let me just go back.
Is Deb coming? Do we know?
No, sorry. Deb and Billy will not be here.
Oh, that's a bummer because we haven't had interaction with Deb for so long.
Yeah. Unfortunately, she cannot make it. Okay, so tonight I did switch it around a little bit. I put that in my email. We want to actually start with talking about next steps, which I think sounds like maybe I jumped in on a conversation Natasha and Karen were having briefly about that. But kind of talk about where we're going and really, are we ready? And then before we dive into that document I sent you, and really, I think maybe kind of depending on that conversation we have, we will determine whether or not even a review of the draft document tonight makes sense, or if we break apart and work on that individually. Does anyone have questions about the agenda? All right, so let's just dive into our first question before you is, are we ready to present to the Board of Trustees? The original plan was to do so on the 1st of June, which is next week. And so I'm just gonna kind of be looking for each of you to weigh in on, yes, we're ready, no, we need more time, or perhaps it's a combination of yes and no. Maybe some committees are ready to move forward and others need more time. There is some pros and cons to that yes and no. If we say split this up, is that we wouldn't necessarily see the duplications or maybe the overlaps if we did like half the document first and then the second half later. So something to consider, but definitely an option. So I'd like to just kind of run through this list and get your feedback. And I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. So Scott, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm finding out at this very moment that our document that we worked on this afternoon is not in the Google Docs. So I would say at the very least, we need to get it into Google Docs. There was some formatting, so it needs to be copied and pasted in. I'll spend some time on that. And, I would say, since part of our committee is not actually on hand right now, I don't think that I would be comfortable saying that we are completely 100% ready for prime time yet.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Tom, here, I agree. Under the specifics, I felt like the document's a little weak.
Okay, thanks. And welcome, Tom.
Miranda, I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Quickly. Could you announce what subcommittee you're on? Which subcommittee we're talking about?
We're talking about the full document, not even subcommittee specific, but what Scott and Tom were referring to as municipal government and economic development.
Okay, thank you.
But I think to that point, so we're talking about your specific, but really, are we ready to even move forward with this whole document? And so maybe you can weigh in on both. And May, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thought is that I'm surprised at the thought of moving forward to the board before we have a little more chance to interact with the committees with their kind of finished documents. I guess it kind of depends on what's going to happen if the board approves it. And so it's kind of a spiraling question. And another thing that is going to inform my decision, I guess, is whether or not we are going to have a component of this whole process where we do utilize what we've suggested in the public engagement. And so I guess my overall feeling is I think the committee should work together. I think it's always good when the committee gets together, and I would almost think we'd want to answer these questions at the end of the meeting. So I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Elise, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think we could polish the economic government document better. You know, I really wonder what's the board going to do with it in the end. I guess the question would be best answered by May, because she's been at a bunch of these other meetings going back to the 90s. And I guess the question is, for all these other Envision documents, what happened to them once they were adopted by the board?
If I may, I know I'm staff, but I've also this is the third Envision process I've been a part of. And I can tell you as staff, I keep that document, that Vision 2020, at hand. I have never written or participated in a budget process without that being the guiding document along with the comp plan. So for us as staff, or at least for me personally, it's very much in the forefront of what we do and do the decisions we make on a daily basis in regards to operations of the community center align with the appropriate parts of that vision statement. So for me, it's a tool. It's another tool, and it's an important tool because it's what the community wants from us. And to me, it's also what the board has based their working goals on. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, Lee, this is May. I think that's great, and I think that there are other people like Dawn that are doing that. But we discussed in Parks and Rec the idea of a tool to evaluate projects that people might want to propose to Parks and Rec. And I'm guessing that they might want to compare it to these plans. And what I have found in these years of meetings is that sometimes more, sometimes less, the board is driven by the document. And I think what we've seen with pressure from a number of different sides is that the goals and objectives of the last one, I don't think a lot of them were achieved because other thing pushed them out of the way. And so that's why I brought up the idea of a tool for the board, maybe in the planning commission. I think others would have a better idea of how to create that, but I certainly think that might be a way that as the agendas are set, they are measured against these goals and objectives. That would be an improvement that I would suggest, I guess, based on that.
I agree, May. I think that's a good idea. This is Jill. I think over the years, because I was part of the 2020 visioning process too, just as a community member, I didn't get engaged in a high level, but I went to some of the charrettes and such. And as a community member and somebody that runs a community nonprofit, I reference the Envision 2020 document often, actually, because a lot of it I saw when I would read through the Envision 2020, it helped me to see that, you know, this organization was on track to maybe meet some of those goals for the town, you know, which reflects well in grants and other things. So it was a useful tool it has been for Wild Bear. So I think, and it is something you can access any day of the week on the website. It's not like it's hidden on a shelf somewhere. It's actually on the website along with the comp plan and anything else that you ever want to look for, So I don't know how you get, I love what Dawn said, because I think that that's the most practical use of an Envision 2020 is when the staff actually uses it to make decisions and implement goals and things. So, I do think it's worthy work. So I think it's worthy of our effort to make it as great as we can make it.
I agree totally. My concern here, I guess, is that I'm fine with you, Jill, and May, and Dawn, and everybody that's using this document. I'm wondering, can we get the municipal government to use it? Can we actually get elected officials on the board, planning commission, board of trustees to actually do something based on the document that we come up with? Or is it just fluff?
So I'm going to answer to that, Lee. I think that I think you're in the municipal, right? You're on the municipal. I think it would be worth putting that in it as a suggested, or even an objective to say that, implement a tool or something that actually, makes this plan utilized to a high level on the municipal government. I mean, I think that this is an opportunity for you or whoever else is on the committee to actually make that kind of thing happen. This is a huge opportunity. And I think since staff does use it, I do think that it can then be, brought to the higher level of municipal government because it's in the Envision 2030. So I think it's an opportunity, Lee, to just put it in that document.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see their feet held to the fire.
And I think also that what May was talking about is the community engagement goals. That community engagement piece should be integrated into, this municipal government piece somehow, or even, or all of the committee goals, the community engagement piece. So I think the municipal government should use and I can't tell you firsthand whether or not they've used it. I do know that I've seen it referenced in town meetings and different things that I've been involved in through the municipal government. But, maybe it needs to be brought to a higher level from your perspective.
Well, and Lee, I don't know if you feel like your questions are answered, but Chris was next on my list. So I'd be curious if Chris wanted to weigh in on not only this question, but also what we've been discussing.
Yeah, and I think my answer is kind of on both answers, kind of both of those together, because certainly having been involved in the municipal government side of town for a while, the guiding document has been Envision 2020. I'm already jumping to the next one. And when we sit there in the meetings, the thing we look at is the big printout, which as I think actually when I started getting involved in town, I could read it from across the room, but my eyesight's gotten worse, and now I need to have it printed out on my screen. But having this, the document, and I admit the document that Miranda sent out, the 40-pager, I've only had a chance to glance through. I haven't had a chance to read it in depth yet this evening, but it is very in depth, and the thing we reference almost exclusively in every kind of every time we look for a grant opportunity or we're looking at these projects is that printout on the wall of the community center, and which is also sort of that 2-page executive summary, the vision. And I think what we've got here so far is each committee, our visions are that. I see that as that guiding document. And then, some committees have gone into greater detail than others, and we have down to projects and things like that, which I think are going to be a useful additional tool. But I think we really have to focus on those guiding philosophies. Because, you look back at the one from 2020 and it talks about how, alternatives for building use of sustainable materials, non-motorized travel in town, reduced light and noise pollution. We've worked on the light. Noise is tough in this town with the motorcycles, having been buzzed several times today. But you know, a lot of these things are things that we've directly worked on and have set our town goals off of. So I'd say yes, we have definitely used Envision 2020 as a guiding document to direct the plans or the goals of the town, with the caveat that, you know, a lot of things change in 10 years. And 10 years ago, I don't think, you know, we saw a lot of the things we're seeing now, we hadn't quite yet imagined. So trying to write it in such a way that, knowing that 10 years from now, we're going to be looking at a situation that, you know, we maybe can't quite imagine yet. So I'm not sure. I need to have a better chance and longer chance to look at the 40-page document to know if it's really ready to go to the town board. And one thing I've been thinking about is, you know, because presenting it at this town board is important. It's something we need to do. But I would really love to see if we could find a time, maybe it's the second meeting in June or something, where we can have more of a work session with the Visit 2030 and the town board of trustees, so we can have more of a focused discussion on it, because there's so much material in here and I'm not quite sure how we tackle that in a board meeting setting. And ideally it would be something where we can maybe even try to hold this, maybe it's a work session on a Saturday afternoon in Chipeta Park, you know, an in-person thing, so we can all get together, because that's just so much more efficient than trying to do it in a virtual setting. And I think we're losing a little bit by not being able to do that. So
I agree.
There's my random thoughts on that for right now.
Appreciate it. Kayla, what are you thinking?
Well, I have always said from the beginning that I think that each individual group goes off and does their thing, but at some point we need to come back together, and I keep using this term, but cross-pollinate, because things we have decided or suggested will pertain to government and economic development, environmental sustainability, parks and rec. What environmental sustainability comes up with will have could pertain to parks and rec and arts and culture. So I think we're not crisscrossing enough in ways that I think could be beneficial to the final document that is put out there. And I do think that you know, hopefully we're not everybody that's been involved in this is not just looking at this in terms of, okay, what is this going to do for the next 10 years or 9 years, that we really do have an eye on way down the road besides the next 9, 10 years. I think it's possible to do that, and I think it's probably very advantageous to do that and be very progressive as far as, you know, we want to be known as the little town that recycles everything, and you know, how do we get to zero waste? How do we get to, you know, turning us into a solar community? Well, these are things that, those are long-term goals that I think we can start now and work on, but hopefully they come to fruition soon, but they will, no pun intended, but sustain us through a much longer period of time than just the next 10 years. So I think we're all getting there, but I think that we need a lot of fine tuning, and I think each one of the groups, I know for me, I get so close to material that you start glossing over things that people might understand or not get. And so to have clear perspectives from other people in other groups, I think it would be a really beneficial thing. So those are my thoughts. So I don't think we're ready quite yet, but we're chopping away and we're getting there.
Yeah, I think we're starting to get that idea, but I want to keep running through everyone, and then maybe when we could talk kind of next steps of what that might look like. So Karen Blakemore, what are your thoughts?
I liked what Chris Larson was talking about, which was coming up with a 2-page 2030 vision statement. and also getting the board together with the committee members to kind of talk about everything that we came up with, and how to move forward on the goals, objectives, projects, initiatives. With 2020, the end product of Envision 2020 was the 2-pager that Chris mentioned, that's on the wall of in the community center. So I think we need that. And then from there, the comprehensive plan built off of that, along with other guiding documents of the town. So what we're doing for the goals and objectives and the projects and initiatives is really the comprehensive plan. You know, my concern is that we have 2 sets of goals and objectives, one in Envision 2030 and one in the comprehensive plan. We have 2 sets of strategic action plans. And so we need to figure out how to work with that. And I think that might be a good topic for the in-person meeting, if we have one, with the Board of Trustees. I'll also say on the projects and initiatives, those, you know, we put together those for the 2 committees that I'm on, the Environmental Sustainability, Parks, Rec, and Open Space. However, those aren't comprehensive, nor are they necessarily the most important projects and initiatives, nor have they been prioritized. So I don't want us to misrepresent that part of the plan. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I did realize after I sent that out that I forgot to add the disclaimer. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I know I put it in an email to everyone, but if projects and initiatives are in fact added into the document, they will be done as addendums just for the sake of you being able to review it. I stuck it all together, but with the caveat that those are recommendations or possible suggestions, but have not been vetted, as Karen mentioned.
Okay.
So thanks, Karen. Dawn?
Hi. So I also agree with what Chris had to say, and also Kayla. I think it's very beneficial for us to look at the document as a whole. And I also did not have a chance to spend the time I would have wanted to spend on this document to say I'm prepared tonight. But I loved the idea of a work session with the BOT, because I agree it would be difficult during a regular meeting on an agenda with other items. And I do appreciate the clarification, because I was thinking of visioning in terms of broad, overarching, you know, ideas of where we want to go. And I'd be very concerned that such a small group of people would put an action plan together for the next 10 years for future boards, not knowing, as Chris said, what the next 10 years might hold. I can tell you that, you know, it just seemed like we got derailed a few times with fires and floods and pandemics. And those are not things you can anticipate from where we sit right now. Who knows what the future holds for us. So to be prepared and have a vision and be ready to go with it and have it to guide us and as a tool to use, I think it would be beneficial to meet as a group again, go over the whole thing.
Thanks, Dawn. Tashna?
Hi. Just to be brief, I feel that the Health and Human Services Committee has been so simpatico that we are ready to go. However, based on those who have spoken before, a lot of good points were made. And of course, the only one I can remember at the moment is about the individual committees meeting with the Board of Trustees. I think that that is an excellent idea. So I guess I would just defer to the majority, which seems to be to wait until the second meeting.
Okay, thanks, Natasha. Now, Ari, I
Hey.
know you waited a little bit in the chat, but yeah, what's your thoughts?
Hey, everybody. Hey. Yeah, not to, say what's already been said too many times, but I think there's so many moving parts within this project of different subcommittees. It makes sense that we're not all there just yet because we have 16 people. So of course it's going to take some time for that. The 2-pager idea I think is excellent, as well as doing that working group really quick, like Chris said. I think that's kind of vital at this point, just to like really flush it out and get things done. I do think that the Health and Human Services, like Atasha and Tom and I were talking in the chat, we feel good to go. I feel like we really flushed it out as best we could. So I think that we're good in that regard. Majority, though, we don't want a whole document that isn't feeling in a good place to just go out, like you guys said. And then for just mentioning that, making sure things aren't fluff, I believe that, this might be one of those things where, just like, 2020 Envision, you got to throw spaghetti to the wall and see what sticks, right? It's a fluid kind of project. It's kind of like not one of those projects you meet a deadline and you have you got the okay or not. It's an ongoing continuum. So I think that accountability is for us, right? Like, to make sure the follow through is there. We don't just hand it off and give it. That follow through has accountability attached. And that's what we all signed up for. That was the dotted line. So I think those are my points that I wrote down on an envelope, and I'm going to stop there. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Ari. Jill?
Hi. Yeah, I think that it is wise not to present this to the BOT. And I think that, I guess I have a question. Wasn't 2020 facilitated by a professional?
It was. And so the 2030 was approached a little bit differently, and a lot of that was kind of pandemic related constraints, funding being a part of that. And so this is a little different and definitely a shot in the dark in that we handled it internally. And I wouldn't say any one of us is an expert in these types of plans. And so it's quite different in that sense.
Yeah, so I think if I recall, I think that the facilitator for the Envision 2020, collected all the community input and then actually created the goals and objectives from the input that, the committee members and other people provided. And so having the format and understanding of what a strategic plan or an Envision plan should have within it, I think made that a strong plan, in my opinion. I think that, it might be worth kind of taking all this great work that we've done, all this, and, it might be worth having some kind of a professional sort of distill it into, just, my thought is to distill it into a real plan of, and maybe where there are gaps, because I am sensing that people are kind of at the end of their work on this. I could be wrong, but that maybe we've reached our limit. And, I definitely think that a working session with the board, and I don't know who else, at Chipeta Park would be worthy of a good thought, because I think we would be able to move things along. And I also liked Kayla's idea of cross-pollinating. But then, I also think that people are very busy, and I just wondered if, and I know, Miranda, you did an incredible job of, putting your expertise in there to make sure we were on track. But I just would really like to see a professional facilitator, somebody to take the work and create it into something and then try to dig on where the holes are. That would be my opinion.
Great, thanks, Jill. Tom, I know you had kind of chimed in when Scott shared his that you weren't ready, but is there anything else you want to add? You're muted if you're there. I'll come back. Susan, do you have
I'm
thoughts?
ready.
Okay, sorry, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're really about as close to ready as we're going to get. I think I feel that we're just weak on one section. I think one more go around, and we're talking a day or two, not weeks. And I really would like to see us like the mayor said, get together face to face if possible, just to thrash it out. But I think we're closer than not.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. And Susan, you're last on my list.
Okay, yes, I've heard a lot of very good ideas. I like the idea of a meeting at Chipeta Park. I think presenting this at the BOT, it's too much, even when we're ready. And I don't think we're ready now. I agree that we need more time. A couple of things, you know, we've talked about the 2020 a lot. It was much more streamlined, as people have pointed out, 2 pages, and much more big concepts. So in some ways, this process has been good in that a lot of ideas have been fleshed out. But I think we need to come to a 2 or 3 page streamlined vision statement. And I think that before we had a meeting, I know Miranda, you said you'd intended to send this out and we could send in comments, because I think it would be good to do there's some basic work of where is there overlap or repetition, or are there things we can combine from different committees to make put in the executive summary, whatever we want to call it, that 2-page short thing. And there's also places that conflict. One of the things that really struck me in reading through, I read through them all tonight before the meeting, and you know, the 2020 and the executive summary, the things, I don't have it in front of me, but one thing that stands out in my mind is small is beautiful, less is more. And there are some pretty expensive ideas in here, and also I think different concepts of the future of NED. So 2 of the things that struck me are the Health and Human Services, that we're going to have a clinic here that's going to have evening and weekend. We're going to have transportation for people to go there. That is something you'd expect to find in a town much larger than what we are now. And then I think economic development, there was a mention that they'd like Nederland to be the economic hub of the peak-to-peak region, which wasn't defined, but I assume they mean, well, I don't know, we're going somewhere north and south of here. So that to me is a vision of a town that's much larger than it is now. And then we have other things in here that talk about preserving the natural setting, actually conservation, preservation, restoration of the natural lands around us. And then I noticed in, I think it's in economic development, that said we will have more developments that don't, quote, unduly degrade our natural setting. So I think there's both areas of overlap and there's conflict. And I think we need to flesh out our vision more. And if there are conflicts in how we envision the future, I think one of the ways to get a better discussion of those things is to get that data and facts. You know, what are the basics? For example, talking about that medical clinic, you know, what capacity do we have? 2 basic underlying things I think we need to look at are data about what our current capacity is, what it is, what we would have to do to increase it, say wastewater, water, that's in the housing thing, staffing, because if we have more development, we also have more cost. So I think those basic questions should be brought into any discussion that we have about what is our vision. Do we want to be an economic hub or not? And then I also think we need to get the science on, you know, water, future, temperature, fire. We know there are going to be wildfires. And I just read that the federal government may very well, for the very first time, declare a water shortage on the Colorado River basin. And so I think science about, so facts about our capacity, the reality of what we can do with the staff we have, the funding we have, and the reality of what we can expect from wildfire and increased temperature and decreased water availability, that those things should be brought into a conversation and discussion we have, so that the vision that we have is realistic. So in short, yes, I think we need more time. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. So I think what I've gathered, and maybe I'll look for Karen Garrity to also summarize this with me, but is that obviously there's time is needed to review the document, and understandably so, because I sent it out only a few hours, but that perhaps the Envision 2030 committee should meet essentially as a whole to review that document, to kind of talk about, do the cross-pollination as Kayla talks about, and streamline it together as a group. Then maybe from there, we move into a work session with the Board of Trustees because we have a tightened up document, can start to talk about what that 1 to 2 pager looks like. And then I know only Jill mentioned it, but I'm happy to look into, potentially seeing what the cost might be for someone to take our work and help us to distill it down. But Karen Garrity, do you feel like I summarized that, or do you have other thoughts?
I think you did a great job of summarizing, and it sounds like there's a lot of people interested in meeting like outdoors at Chipeta Park or something along that line, and maybe not aligning with the evenings we've been doing, but maybe on a Saturday or something like that. So I guess, I don't know, Chris Larson, you're the one who really mentioned about potentially meeting at Chipeta Park. Were you envisioning that being just this committee and finalizing what we want to present to the Board of Trustees? Because you also mentioned, having that work session with the Board of Trustees. So it seems to me that we would do the first one with the big group, potentially outside, and then do the work session with the Board of Trustees. That's correct?
That's what I'm hearing. I mean, it sounds like, having listened to everyone's comments, having this committee get together in person to work the final steps on this, I think would be great. And I think doing it in Chipeta Park would be awesome, or anywhere else outdoors. And the only reason I called Saturday afternoon out is, we're getting into that time of year where it starts to potentially get this time of day, we might start getting rainstorms. So if we target midday on a Saturday, we got a better chance of good weather. But I'm open to other times, and I think we could just put a poll around to figure out when that might work for the majority of the board.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm never a fan of trying to decide altogether in a meeting. So my thought would be we put together a doodle poll with an effort of trying to meet as a committee, just an Envision 2030 committee, perhaps within the next week and a half. The board meeting on June 15th is packed. And so asking the board to start, or Board of Trustees to start early, knowing that there's a chance that they're running until 11 o'clock, I think is a lot to ask of them. And so perhaps we're looking at July, and I know that pushes it out, but if we kind of spent June tightening this document up as an internal group, the Envision committee, also potentially seeing if we can bring in that professional, I think that would be a greater use of this upcoming month and trying to tackle it that way. But I'll just kind of open it up. Are there other thoughts to that proposal?
I just thought, one of my thoughts is, the 2020 that we've talked about, and Dawn mentioned she used, and Jill, it is a very succinct, nice document, but I wonder if that couldn't be part of our discussion, that we go through the document and decide where have our visions changed or haven't they, and what have we met, where have we fallen short as a group. That also might help us form our opinions for 2030. That's all.
So,
Or just to see the structure comparative, that could help.
I'm wondering if we can just take the vision statements, and that is Envision 2030. I mean, that's what Vision 2020 is. It's the vision statements, not goals and objectives and projects and initiatives.
And I know Karen Blakemore and myself and Karen Garrity have talked about this quite a bit. By no means we want to toss out all the work that you all have been doing, but that is a thought, is that the vision statements become Envision 2030, and then the goals and objectives is really just a kind of a draft guiding document for the comp plan, perhaps for, the parks and the trails plan or other plans that come forward. The feedback here that we receive from the public could still be used.
Yeah, so along those same lines, all the work that we've done with the goals and objectives and projects and initiatives would be input to the comp plan as what the community desires. So more specific, ways to make the vision more specific. So those could just feed into the comp plan like that. And I had another thought, but I can't. It's not coming to me right now. So I mean, there's so much. We don't want to lose all that work that we've done already, but I'm not sure that meeting to talk about overlaps and integration and you know, the big spaghetti. I mean, it's a huge. There's so much detail there. It's huge. If we just looked at the vision statements, put those together in one document, and then do any fine tuning that would be needed to that. And that would be our Envision 2030.
I think that's awesome, Karen. I mean, I think the spaghetti was why I was seeking professional help. So
I see a lot of continuity of phrases, words in all the vision statements. So I think putting them all together would not be that, you know, flushing them to a point where they're succinct in a 2-page vision statement, I think is very workable because there is a lot of continuity. It's just some of the words may be different.
And we could look at those statements to see if we have any gaps. And work on that. You know, that maybe that's a good first step. I know we've done that once. We started with the vision statements, but perhaps now that we've gone through and have done a little revision on those, and we've come up with goals and objectives that detail the vision statements, we can have another look at those and say, is this our vision for the next 10 years?
This is Scott Papich. I'd like to add something if it's okay. I think what I'm hearing over and over and over, that there's a lot of consistency, or there's maybe some high-level statements are being made by different teams that all fall in line. I think that's true. I think some groups have also put some detail in that if it's not put in at this point in time, there's no way to know where you draw the line and how much detail goes into bullet points, right? But if there's not some level of detail on initiatives and specific projects, then it leaves it open to somebody else to do it at another time. And I think it's incumbent on this group to actually, you know, commit to putting down some things that we think really, really are important. I see several of them in the master doc. I think those are good things for us to discuss. Maybe when we do some kind of a group, if we can all get together face to face and do a working session, I think the vision statement is really important. If we boil it down to a 2-pager, I think some high level vision that everybody shares is important, and then we break it down to committees, put it all into a 2-pager. But I think for the larger document, it's okay. We got to permit ourselves to put some detail in.
Well, the 2 committees that I worked on, Parks, Rec, Open Space, and Environmental Sustainability, those plans can actually be used by the 2 advisory boards as a basis for their comprehensive plans. So, and both of those advisory groups have looked at the plans, but they're at that level of detail. And they can also be, and those plans for those 2 advisory groups are actually input to the comprehensive plan. They were for 2020, and they would be for 2030 as well.
I wondered if the other committee work could have another set of eyes look at those like we did with ProSab and SAB. And so maybe each committee could have, you know, maybe the BOT or others just take the document and add some things to it. And then maybe then it bounces back to the committee members to then complete. Or we did get a lot of input from them, and that was extremely helpful. So
I think Karen Blakemore's idea of using the vision statements is good in its essence. I don't think all of the vision statements are in a shape that we could just take them as they stand and stick them together. So that's one thing, and they would need to be worked on a bit. But also we have to come up with the executive summary, if I understand it, which would be the overview of who we see Netherland being, what we want for our town in 2030. I liked Jill's suggestion that previously we had an outsider look at it. And one of the things I'm wondering, you know, I came in late because they needed more help on the community engagement subcommittee. So I wasn't there in the beginning, but I know there are people here who reviewed all of the community, the input that we got. So two things. One, I'm wondering how much does what we would put in the vision statement mesh with what seemed to be the majority view. I haven't looked at all of the community. I haven't looked at any of the community views. I'd want to make sure that we were truly representing the community view and not the views of just a few people. And then second, I think if we need to go out to the community again, it's important that we get this right, as several other people have said. So I do think we need more work, and I like Jill's idea of getting an outside person to look at it. But I do think, Karen Blakemore, that we do need more discussion about areas. Maybe we don't need to worry about overlap, but we need to worry about places where there are direct conflicts in the visions, which I think there are some. So that's my comment.
So my understanding, Susan, of the executive summary is that the executive summaries, the vision statements. So
you looked at 2020, it starts with a summary at the very beginning, and then it goes into then after that, it kind of looks like, you're right, it looks like just the vision statements for each thing, like municipal government and
the summary, the first summary describes the shared values of the community.
Yeah, something like that. Right,
Yeah.
right. That's what I'm talking about. We don't have that. It needs discussion to come to it.
Well, yeah, we could the vision statement should be based on shared values of the community. But we can like backtrack from those. As far as the SWOT analysis is concerned, we did look at that for the two committees that I'm on. I organized the responses based on, I pulled out the responses for that were relevant to the two committees that I'm on and categorized those. And so I think we did capture what the public felt was important.
I did that too, Karen, if you recall. I think I posted that, but I'm not sure what folder it was in. Because there was a lot of shared values there. And, you know, I think that, you know, these questions of, do we want to stay with small is beautiful? They're going to affect the way the whole thing fits together. And we're going to get to that elephant that we haven't wanted to recognize in the room of, you know, what is meant by an urban center or the center. What does that look like? And I don't really see a lot of commitment here to the process of keeping the public informed. So, and I don't know who that falls to. But I think that as a group, we should be thinking, I got distracted looking at that thing that Miranda just posted. But yeah, that we should be reaching out to the community right now. You can get a 3x5 or 4x7-inch postcard and have them printed. The Gilpin County, I mentioned this before, excuse me, we can get volunteers to, I mean, all you have to do, we would have to do as a committee
Can't go.
would be
Can't go.
to
Can't
agree,
go.
maybe this would be a good thing to do at the in-person meeting. You know, what would that look like? You know, what are we referring
No.
back to?
No.
And let's get some input on the big question, you know, do you see, you know, what do you see? Some very specific, just questions that if there are conflicting areas emerging among the subcommittees, I think the court of public opinion is important. Dawn had some good ideas about where to put up flyers. So I would like to see that part of the discussion and actually part of the agendas from now on is what can this committee, what are the questions that we might want to ask the public? I wanted to make that point, and I also wanted to think or get people thinking about prioritization. I think the reason a lot of these objectives are being spelled out is because, well, we may have stayed the same in some ways in town. In other ways, we haven't in terms of meeting objectives of 2020 and other planning documents and things that have been under discussion for a long time, like the second bridge. You know, where are our priorities? I mean, is our first priority becoming a home rule town? You know, why wouldn't we be thinking about emergency egress at this point? Why can't we prioritize people's safety over, you know, large questions about what do we mean by home rule? Do we mean the next, you know, urban corridor for as far as we can push it? We don't really know. So, yeah, I think we need to get our priorities straight as a committee, except for the ones where we don't have agreement, and then put those out to the public. I mean, it's a pretty simple process.
So May, I think what you're contributing is great fodder for this group meeting that you guys have, where you could really chew on some of this stuff. You know, what do you want to do for next steps? Karen's idea of really just attacking the vision statements first and trying to create that shorter document, I think is a great idea as well. The one thing I wanted to ask Karen Blakemore is, do you see, you know, trying to take the vision statements and creating that one document? Do you think that's an effort best tackled by the entire committee? Or do you think that's something that should be done on the side with a few people? I mean, what are you envisioning for that?
Yeah, I think it would be best done by one person or a small group and then presented to the committee.
That's kind of what I was thinking, you know, and I'd be willing to help you do that. Not that it would be the final document, it would just be a starting point then for that bigger conversation.
Yeah, Karen, here's, I guess I almost see it the other way though, because I think Susan brings up some good points that until everyone's fully read the document and they see all the feedback, that perhaps having the full committee meeting first makes sense. Then you at least know what direction you're going, and then that smaller group breaks out and works on the specific vision statement.
Well, that could work too. I guess it's really what's the pleasure of the larger group. Do you all want to meet first and then take it from there?
That would be my preference.
Okay. Mine too.
Mine
would
is
be my preference.
Yeah.
And what about feedback before we meet? Yes, I do agree that we meet first and hash out some things and then do the vision. But what about this idea that we can make written comments first that would be the basis for the meeting that we have if people want to?
So my ask would be to do it on Dropbox. You know, I think it gets tough if you're not tracking changes in Google Drive. And for some people, Google Drive is showing up as like a skewed document. So everyone has
Yes.
access to that Dropbox. Scott, I will take the projects and initiatives you sent and add it in, but everyone can go in there and comment and they can respond back and forth to each other. I will tell you though, it starts to get really messy and kind of convoluted. And so just be mindful of that, you know, we're not nitpicking little things and it's really kind of broader conversations because otherwise the comments just fill up and it's hard to read and it's hard to sort. But I would recommend going in there now before you meet and starting to give that feedback to one another.
I'd like to say something. Getting
Go ahead.
back to something that Susan and May had said, I think before the finished document goes to the Board of Trustees, I think it's very important to have the process follow up via community engagement. Now, we can't have everything go to community engagement for feedback, or else we would get nothing done. There has to be a boundary. You know, is 50 enough? Is 100 enough? Is 75 enough? How many? The people who are interested and the people who want to be engaged will be. We can't keep going around in a circle until we get a certain quota of people and deem it sufficient. However, I do think that it is important that once we get the final document before it goes to the board, that we put it out on the town website, whatever, you know, multiple mediums, and solicit the feedback from the community and then go from there. Then the due diligence is done. That's my comment.
So we did spend the month of April getting community feedback, public feedback on the document. So, and then we incorporated all the feedback. So you want to do that again?
But Karen, I think we missed a great big segment of I mean, we talk about our unique and diverse population, and it really is. A lot of people do not get the paper. Some people do not have computers. They don't go on Facebook, and they get their information when they go shopping, if they look at the poster board or they talk to people. So Dawn and I were talking today about, she has a whole flyer route when she's hosting an event, and, you know, post it at the post office and give people real questions to answer, perhaps. Maybe set up some kind of a informal or formal survey. I don't know how those work.
So we did a survey to start.
I know, Karen, please don't be patronizing. I'm saying that
I'm not trying
yes,
to be
you are. I'm
patronizing.
saying there's a diversity of people that were not reached. And I think you are not responding to that point. You're saying again what we did. I know what we did, but we didn't reach a lot of people.
We need to have the final document go out in multiple medias before we present it to the board. Those medias can be flyers in various locations. They could be various websites. They can be through the newspaper directing people. They can be through postcards, various methods.
Okay,
Not
so
just one method.
So, and the document is everything that we've done so far. Is that what you're thinking?
No, the final document before it goes to the Board of Trustees for approval.
Okay, so it's what we have currently, but
Well, the
modified.
other option would be to first have a work session with the Board of Trustees where you're getting some guidance and input from them before you were to send anything out to the public. That way,
Correct.
that way you've got their input and their guidance,
Yeah.
and you're not going to send something out to the public that's going to end up being vastly changed or potentially changed.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it sounds like, you know, we're already an hour into this and now we're starting to get into the details. Instead, my suggestion is we've all agreed that we need to find a time to meet, and Miranda is going to send out a doodle poll or something along that line so everyone can indicate when they're available to meet. And some of the stuff you're discussing now can actually be discussed at that meeting. And prior to that meeting, everyone's going to look at the document that Miranda worked very intensely on in the last 24 hours to just try to get it to you in this draft form. And we realize you haven't had the time to really review it. So you can do that as well. And really, you can decide your next steps when you get together and iron out some of these other details that you've been discussing. Does that sound fair to everyone?
Yes.
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 Perfect. Thanks, Karen. So I will send out, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in response to what Karen Blakemore was saying, but also at least my view of this, and maybe others don't see it, I see a conflict in these documents we haven't resolved. There are those, and there are things in here where we have a vision of maintaining the wildlands, the preservation, keeping our wildlands, and we have and staying small. And then we have a vision of becoming an economic hub and having a large medical center and having all kinds of services. I mean, I'm not saying anything about one's right and one's wrong, but they're different visions. And that's what we're supposed to be doing, is coming up with a vision. And the fact is, this vision is going to influence the comp plan, which is going to influence the IGA with Boulder County. And the question of, when it's in the municipal government, the question of whether we should exit the IGA, whether we should renegotiate it, that is the key. There is how much development we want outside the town, because it became very clear in the renegotiation of the IGA that the point where we fell apart was the county still wanted more restriction on development than what the leadership of the town wanted. So that's a key issue. We have to resolve it. And that's why, Karen, we're not just talking about going out for a survey and asking people what they like best about Nederland. We need to decide among ourselves, see if we agree on a vision. You know, do we want to stay small, or do we want to develop, expand, become an economic hub, and these other things, you know? So that's what.
So that's something, Susan, the larger group can talk about. There's certainly a lot of areas where you intersect, and then there's going to be some areas that are conflicting, but that's to be expected when you have 7 very diverse areas, and some of those 7 include 3 different areas like arts, culture, and education. So that's to be expected. And I think if everybody comes to this general meeting with an open mind, not making any assumptions, and really listening to each other and sharing, I think you can find that common ground. And you also may need to be open to some compromise and collaborating to problem solve and create this document. So
Any way we could get a facilitator for that meeting? Could we get a facilitator for that meeting? I just think we need one. I think it'd be really great if we could remain focused and not get into the weeds too much, but to look at the overarching vision, the vision statements, determine if we want more than that in our presentation to the board. But I think there's too many side things that happen that get us off track. That's just my opinion. I really think having a facilitator or some kind of professional guidance on this very important document is worthy.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, as I look for that kind of professional person to potentially even look at the final document, I also will ask them about serving as that facilitator.
Yeah, where's Gary? Keep us on when we need him.
Yeah, we had reached out to him. He said he was tied up, but I know we had received a couple other suggestions. And so we could always reach back out to Gary and see.
Yeah, and Gary said he had no experience facilitating things virtually, but I think if we're going to do an in-person meeting, there's a chance if it works with his schedule, I think he might be willing to help us as long as he's available.
That has my vote. at Chipeta?
So while everyone was talking, I just wanted to pull this up so you were all looking at the same. So as I understand it, here will be the plan. The committee will review the document, this is a picture of it, as it stands right now in Dropbox and offer comments and feedback. Please respond to the doodle poll that I'll send out later on tonight. Ideally, you should respond to it in the next couple days. We'll plan to meet in person at Chipeta either sometime next week or the weekend based on the date and time that the majority works for the majority. From there, a small committee will be selected to work on that 1 to 2 page vision statement document. I do recommend a full committee meeting on June 22nd to look at that document. Then we'll hold a work session with the Board of Trustees, their first meeting in July, followed by some public outreach specific to that final vision statement document that would be a multitude of different formats to try to get feedback. Does that seem like I've captured it? Am I missing anything?
We just need to have enough time to work on that 1 to 2 page vision statement document.
Yeah. So my hope was that we could try to meet as a outside of Chipeta, you know, sometime between now, well, ideally in the next couple of days, and like either the 6th or 7th of June, giving that then group 2 weeks to work on that vision statement document. Does that feel like enough time, Karen, or do you think more is needed?
I think 2 weeks is good.
Okay.
I think we want to come up with the shared values and try to come up with vision statements that are not conflicting.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Great.
think and get input from certain people on the committee if we maybe okay.
Hey, then my ask would be when I release the doodle poll that you respond no later than Friday morning, so we have enough time to set. And I know the date, it's probably unlikely that it works for everyone on this committee, so we will select the date that works for the majority.
Okay, it's May here. I wanted to jump in. I would just change one thing. I would say I would agree that we should have a facilitator at the meeting, and but I think the public outreach should happen if there is, as I think I said, but maybe I didn't, that if committees are kind of not agreeing on basic fundamental priorities and so forth, I think at that point, at that meeting, as Karen said, one of the things we can talk about is big picture questions. And so I would put that public outreach on hot topics after the meeting in person at Chipeta Park. And that would be one of the things we're going to do, is try to either come to terms or come to the vital questions that we need in order to proceed forward with the overall vision. Because it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually align everything so that it's going to happen.
I think we should also determine what the outcome is that we want to achieve at the Chipeta Park visit there. And if it is facilitated, I would hope that whoever's facilitating it would then come up with the next steps. Like, this is our first stab at that, but you know, I would love to see at the Chipeta Park meeting that we actually come up with next steps, whether it is more public outreach, whether it is, you know, whatever it is that we end up agreeing upon that needs to happen to make it a solid document.
That sounds good to me. Yeah.
Perfect. So I think then the other question that was posed to everyone is, I would feel as a tad bit premature, to Jill's point, if we bring in that facilitator and someone to serve to help guide us moving forward, they will help us understand what parts of this plan really maybe are meant more for guiding the comprehensive plan, and what does our final vision document look like. So my feeling is that we've kind of reached the end of tonight's meeting because we know where we're going from here. But does anyone have anything else, or perhaps feel otherwise?
Brad, I have a quick question. This is Scott. On your bullet point number 4 here, the 1 to 2 page vision statement doc, just for absolute clarity, you are talking about a 1 to 2 page vision statement doc that covers all the committees. It's an overall vision, right?
Yeah, it's what Karen Blakemore had brought up. So it's really
Yep.
potentially pulling out just those vision statements.
Yep.
But sounds like we want to work on those vision statements a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Pulling the vision statements as well as a paragraph on shared values that the vision statements address. Like the same sort of format that we have for 2020.
So I saw further down the list, there's a work session on July 6th with the Board of Trustees. And for some reason, I thought that was what the Chipeta Park thing was. Is that just, what is that?
So the Chipeta Park would be just the internal, this meeting with this
Okay.
group,
Yeah,
and then doing a separate Board of Trustees work session.
gotcha.
But again, I think, Jill, to your point, this step 4 through 7 is maybe like the tentative plan, but we'll look to that facilitator to help us determine if that's the right way to move forward or if there are other recommendations.
Yeah, because actually at that Chipeta Park meeting, we might actually take a stab as a group, if it's possible, for a vision, an overall vision statement, but maybe that's too much to accomplish there. I don't know.
Okay. I'll send this out in an email too, but yeah. Anyone else have anything else to add? Otherwise, we know our orders, we know our plan. Okay.
At some point, I think we should have on there that we celebrate all the great work.
I hate to do it at the end. I feel like there's celebration throughout. If anyone saw in the chat, Jill did recommend that perhaps when we meet in person, we could make it potluck-esque and celebrate. I think yes at the end for sure, but there's a ton of work that's gone into this so far, and we're very appreciative of that. And so I do agree. I'd like to celebrate that, we're 5 months in, and it's a very in-depth document. And while it's likely going to change where it stands today, I think just taking a moment and reviewing it as you look through each section, it really shows just how hard everyone worked. And I know I speak on behalf of myself and Karen. It was a pleasure to watch it unfold, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how all that work turns into our final vision document. Okay, on that note, I think we are done for tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
A great night,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.